Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about dropping out of the hiring process. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why is it that it's becoming so common for senior software engineers to intentionally drop out of the hiring processes that require coding tests? Well, because they're tired of having homework is the normal one. Uh, so basically, you probably know this if you've been trying to be, or if you're a professional software developer, there's a coding test for practically every job you're ever going to get or try to get. And there's an interview process, like there are these sort of standard practices that basically everybody uses. And every coding challenge is different. Every project, like the challenge that the company, like their processes are all going to be different. Some of them are like outlandish, some of them are not so outlandish. It depends on the company, right? But basically, most software developers, especially the ones that are fairly experienced, they've done this a few times, and some of them feel that, well, I've been doing this job for X amount of years. Why the quote unquote hell, why would I have to prove to yet another company that I know how to code? I've been working for so long, etc., etc. And so when, especially the ones that I do coding challenges with or so forth, this is one of the reasons why I have my own flavor of a coding test. That is my personal one that I feel is more efficient and nicer to everybody. I was actually talking to my coworker the other day about this, or rather, we were discussing this, and he said exactly the same thing, that usually because we were formulating a new coding challenge for the company that I was working for, and basically he said that having and I have had these guys where like it takes a whole day, it takes like a whole weekend to finish the challenge because it's such a massive coding challenge. And he said like nobody wants to do that because it's like you're basically asking them to work to just prove that they know what they're doing. And I said, yeah, and that sucks. So what I usually try to do is that I try to, because the problem is it's twofold. I can't just trust that you know what you're saying that you know, because I don't know. Like, as I've said many times, guys, just because you've been working doesn't mean that you're any good. It's that simple. I've met plenty of people who are applying for like senior level and tech lead stuff like that. They're basically useless to, at least to this company. They might be able to swing it in a company where the stakes are lower, or they where like it's not really much of a requirement to be a real expert or something like that. But in some companies, like they are looking for really good people, and these are not really good people. These are below average at best. And so we need some way, as I said to my coworker. I don't think I agree. I don't believe in taking these gigantic, outlandish coding challenges or lead code as well or something like that, even if it's simpler. I believe that the thing that you're trying to do is to find a coding challenge that is just large enough that I can get a good enough sample size of your coding skills. That's what I'm after. I'm not trying to, as I've said this to many candidates when I interview them, guys, if you sit with me in an interview, I'm not trying to fail you. I promise you, I want to hire you, because if I can hire you, then my journey is done. I don't have to pay more recruiters. I don't have to pay for extra. I spend more time on interviewing. I want the first person that I talk to basically be perfect. That would be great, but I have to be honest about it. With when I do interviews and so forth, I have to figure out, is this going to be a good fit, yes or no? And so the thing that I want is to give you just enough, like it's like a small proof of work, basically, where it shouldn't take you forever to do it, but it has to be something where I can see enough. I mean, if you can do the whole thing with a single library import or something like that, I don't really learn much about your coding, right? Which is the difficult part. Where do you find that balance between a challenge that is just great enough that you get the information you want, so you know if you should go further with this candidate, and at the same time not make it so challenging for them that they basically drop out because it's such a difficult thing, right? And that can be very tricky for some companies to figure out. I have my personal one, which is like I like to say, most companies have either a 2 or 3 step process. Usually the coding challenge is usually very It's like one coding challenge and then an interview at minimum. There might be more interviews and so forth. I usually try to suggest to people that if you're going to evaluate somebody's coding skill and you want to basically just know if you should get them into the interview, because it's very difficult to just do interviews over and over and over, because usually you want the coding challenge to just assess some skills. So I usually have two coding challenges, one that is very, very small. And that's the first thing. It's that simplest, it's not necessarily a lead code challenge, but something as small as a lead code challenge that is completable. It's fairly it shouldn't be something that is super difficult. It should just prove to me that this person knows the basics about how to write a program. They know the basic of, say, writing some unit test, or like how to think about this, structuring a data model or something like that. It should basically be implement a function or something like that that fills a certain set of criteria. Just a small thing. And that's the first thing you send to them, not a gigantic super thing or something like that, because just by doing that challenge, how do you know, guys, how many times have you read, say, unit test suites by people, and especially if you've worked for as long as I have now, you can tell when you're reading a junior's implementation, usually when it's like when they're writing tests and like what cases they're testing for and so forth, and when you're dealing with a really experienced software developer, like someone who really knows their stuff. And that's not a really big challenge. It might take an hour to complete or something like that, maybe two at best, at most, and then you get them into the personal interview, because now you have at least have a basic screening process. And then what I usually tell people is that after that they get some type of more realistic coding challenge, something that doesn't either take more than, say, an hour or two or something like that, but basically touches on the areas that you have within the company, so you know whether or not they can actually perform with coding challenges that are relevant to your specific company. And then you go through it with them. You do a review, and because you never get to that point, I usually tell people that if someone has an interview with me, I can tell usually like the experience level fairly well, I'd like to think. So that second code test, you might never see it unless I know for a fact that, yeah, this person pretty much knows all the tools, they seem to have all the relevant experience, etc., etc. Then you're never going to see it. But if you get to that point, we'll do like a small coding challenge, and then we'll have a follow-up where I can look at the code test and sort of say that, okay, they claimed to know all of these things and they seem to be able to produce. It all seems well and fine, etc., etc. Because this process basically, I think it's better generally, because it will reduce. I promise you guys, this will probably it will reduce your dropout of seniors, because as I said, the senior will because the senior wants to figure out if they want to work for you just as much as you want to figure out if they should work for you. But if their threshold for getting to talk to someone in the company is really, really high, then they're why? They have 100 other offers, so they can go and do something else, right? So if you really do have to have that upfront code test, make it something, as I said, just like sort of simple and straightforward for a senior to complete, so that you can just screen some people, so you don't waste your time interviewing candidates that like don't even know the basics, right? And then have the personal interview as quickly as possible. So what I want you to take away from this is that usually why seniors drop out of the process when there's a coding test is either because they talk to someone like myself very early on, and they realize that like they for some reason don't get the code test, but they realize very quickly that they might not, from the personal interview, we ask questions and they can't really answer them, and they realize that, yeah, this is probably not a good environment for me to be in because I might not be able to swing it. And more often than not, it is because they don't want to have homework where like you have a big coding challenge and they just skip it because they feel like they have worked so long that they don't have to prove anything anymore. The reality is, as I said, that the problem with that is that it's hard to assess a skill level just based on that you have been working, because as I've said 100 times, guys, you can work for 20 years and still suck at your job. And that's not just software developers, it's doctors, it's carpenters, it's police, it's whatever. Like anybody can be a really bad person and just sort of still collect a basic paycheck somewhere. And companies want to assess, they want to trust that they're hiring good people. And that's why you have to have some type of gateway to check if this is a good person. But as I said, I recommend that you take a look at my approach to doing this, because I think it works free. I think it works really well. Because as I said, the usual reason why you want an upfront code test is just to screen out so you don't waste your time on the interview, and then you go into the interview as quickly as possible with other seniors you have in the company, because that way the juniors and or the people who don't really know what they're doing, they're going to get screened out. The seniors are going to be able to do something small, prove to you that they know at least some basic coding, and then they get an interview with you where you can figure out if you're a good match very early on, and then you can take other tests later on. But this is a very really, because I tell people all the time, don't underestimate the interviewing process and interviewing a candidate as a means of recruitment. Some of the best software developers, they don't just care about the salary. They care about who they're going to work with inside the company. So if you have some really good interviewers who really know how to speak the lingo and can connect with another senior, you might actually find that they will be happy to do that extra challenge because they're excited to get into the company, which might not be the case if they have to do a lot of boring stuff before they even know if this is an interesting company. Have a great day.